There's nothing quite like that first warm breath of spring air, carrying the earthy scent of damp soil and fresh green growth, is there? You step into the garden after winter's long sleep, and suddenly the weeds are everywhere, pushing up through the mulch, waving their defiant little heads like they own the place. But instead of grumbling and reaching for the hoe, I've learned to smile and reach for a bucket. Because those so-called pests hold a secret power, a rich, living brew that can turn tired beds into thriving paradises. Today, I want to share my favorite way to transform garden waste into a magic liquid fertilizer that smells like the forest floor after rain and feeds plants in ways store-bought stuff never quite matches. Come walk with me through the process, and let's coax some real vitality from the soil together. It all begins with a gentle wander around the edges of your plot, perhaps along the hedgerow or in that forgotten corner where the ground is soft. Gather a generous armful of common weeds, dandelion leaves with their deep taproots pulling minerals from below, young nettles bursting with nitrogen, chickweed that grows so lush in cool spring days, clover nodding with its nitrogen-fixing magic, and even a handful of dock or plantain if they're handy. The more variety you invite in, the richer the story your fertilizer will tell. Each plant has spent the season mining the earth for different treasures. Some hoard potassium for strong stems and sweet fruits. Others concentrate calcium or trace elements like magnesium and iron. In my own patch, I've noticed how a mix like this seems to balance whatever the season throws at the vegetables. Extra vigor for tomatoes after a cool spell, steadier growth for beans when the soil feels a bit hungry. Once your basket is brimming, head to the potting bench or a shady spot outdoors. Take a sharp pair of secateurs and chop everything into rough, inch-long pieces. Don't worry about being too precise. This isn't fine dining. It's more like making a hearty stew for the soil. The smaller bits simply surrender their goodness faster when they meet water. While you're chopping, inhale that fresh, green fragrance. It's already hinting at the life that's about to unfold. Now comes my little twist that makes this brew even more generous. Before the weeds go into their bath, I like to slip in a small scoop of bone meal, perhaps a couple of tablespoons per bucket. It's an old-fashioned addition that brings phosphorus and calcium right where young roots and future flowers need them most. Think of it as giving your future tomatoes or squash blossoms a gentle nudge toward abundance. If bone meal isn't something you keep on hand, crushed eggshells that have been dried and ground can step in as a softer calcium source, though they release their gifts more slowly over the season. Find yourself a sturdy 5-gallon bucket. The kind that once held paint or pickles works beautifully. Fill it about 3/4 with rainwater you've been collecting in barrels, or any dechlorinated water you've let sit out overnight. Chlorine is a bit of a bully. It can silence the very microbes that turn this mixture into liquid gold. Next, gather your chopped weeds into an old pillowcase, a scrap of burlap, or even a mesh laundry bag. Add the bone meal right into the pouch, give it a gentle shake to mingle everything, then tie the top securely with garden twine. Plunge the whole fragrant bundle deep into the water until it's fully submerged, like tucking a baby into a warm cradle. If you're in a hurry or don't have a bag handy, you can simply tumble the weeds straight in. But the pouch method saves you straining later and keeps things tidier. Snap the lid on snugly. Some folks even weigh it down with a brick to keep curious critters or strong winds from interfering. And tuck the bucket somewhere out of direct sun, but still warm enough for fermentation to happen. A spot beside the compost heap or under the eaves of the shed is perfect. Now the quiet magic begins. Over the next 10 to 14 days, the weeds will soften, bubble gently, and release their stored nutrients into a dark, earthy tea. You'll notice a rich, almost sweet barnyard aroma as the beneficial bacteria and fungi get to work breaking everything down. It's the same lively process that happens in healthy forest soil, only concentrated in your bucket. When the time feels right, usually around 2 weeks, though I've let it go 3 during cooler European springs without trouble, lift the pouch out and let it drain back into the bucket. Give it a good squeeze. You'll be amazed how much liquid it still holds. If you went the direct weed route, pour the mixture through an old colander or piece of screen into another container. What remains is your potent weed tea, dark as strong coffee and alive with possibility. But here's the important part. Never splash it straight onto your plants. This brew is concentrated, almost like a shot of espresso for the garden. Dilute it generously. 1 part tea to 10 parts fresh water is my go-to ratio for most vegetables and flowers. For young seedlings, I lean even further toward 1 to 15, just to be gentle. Then I wander the rows with a watering can, pouring slowly at the base of each plant so the roots can sip without shock. Tomatoes drink it up and reward me with heavier trusses. Leafy greens like kale and lettuce push out bigger, more vibrant leaves. Even the roses along the fence seem to flush with deeper color after a few feedings. I've discovered through many seasons that timing matters as much as the recipe itself. In temperate zones across the American Midwest or British countryside, I start my first batch as soon as the soil warms in April, using early spring weeds before they set seed. Another round in early summer refreshes heavy feeders like zucchini and sweet corn right when they're racing to produce. Come late summer, a milder brew supports root crops and perennials as they prepare for the cooler months ahead. In milder Mediterranean-style pockets or Pacific Northwest gardens, you can keep the cycle going almost year-round with frost protection for the bucket. There are lovely variations worth exploring, too. Some gardeners toss in a handful of comfrey leaves for an extra potassium kick, perfect for fruiting plants. Others add a scoop of finished compost or a splash of molasses to feed the microbes and speed things along. I once experimented with adding chopped borage, those starry blue flowers beloved by bees, and the resulting tea seemed to encourage stronger pollinator activity around the beds the following week. Small experiments like these keep the whole process feeling alive and personal, rather than like a rigid formula. Of course, every garden tells its own story, and sometimes things don't go exactly as planned. If your tea develops an overwhelming stench, think rotten eggs rather than earthy richness, it might have gone anaerobic. That usually means the lid was too tight or the mixture too packed. Next time, stir it every few days with a stick to let oxygen in. If the liquid stays too pale after 2 weeks, your weeds may have been too woody or the weather too cold. Try chopping finer or moving the bucket to a sunnier, warmer nook. And always test on a single plant first if you're unsure about strength. Better a slightly underfed cucumber than one that wilts from over-rich feeding. One of my favorite parts about this method is how beautifully it fits into a closed-loop garden. Those weeds you pulled are no longer enemies, but allies, returning borrowed nutrients back to the soil that grew them. It saves money, reduces waste, and quietly builds biodiversity beneath the surface. The microbes you nurture in the bucket eventually make their way into the earth, improving structure and helping retain moisture during dry spells, common in many parts of Europe and the eastern United States. I like to pair this weed tea with other gentle practices. After watering, I mulch thickly with straw or shredded leaves to hold in that moisture and keep the soil life happy. Companion planting adds another layer. Marigolds near tomatoes to deter pests. Basil beside peppers for flavor and vigor. Even the spent pouch contents can go straight onto the compost heap once drained, completing the circle without a scrap left behind. As the seasons turn and your garden responds with lush growth and abundant harvests, you'll start to notice subtle shifts. Plants seem more resilient to unexpected heat waves or sudden downpours. Flowers hold their color longer. Vegetables taste deeper, somehow more alive. It's as if the garden itself is saying thank you for listening to its own language, instead of reaching for a bottle from the shelf. There's a quiet satisfaction in knowing you've created something powerful from what others might toss aside. Next time you're out weeding on a soft spring morning, pause for a moment. Look at those green invaders with fresh eyes. They're not the enemy. They're ingredients for tomorrow's bounty. Why not gather a few, chop them with care, and let the bucket work its slow, bubbling magic while you sip tea on the porch and dream about summer salads. Your own patch, whether it's a few containers on a city balcony in Chicago or a generous plot in the English countryside, will thank you in its own green and fragrant way. The soil remembers kindness. The plants respond to care given freely. And you, fellow gardener, get to watch it all unfold, one diluted watering can at a time. So go ahead, fill that bucket. Let the weeds tell their nutrient-rich story. And when your tomatoes hang heavy and your roses bloom like they're showing off, remember this simple brew started with nothing more than a walk around the garden and a willingness to see possibility where others see problems. The soil is generous if we only learn to listen. Happy brewing, and may your harvests be plentiful and your hands always a little dirty in the best possible way.